Once upon a time, and you'll know this already if you've been around my channel for long enough, I used to make short films, animated ones, and over a few years I made dozens, I think. Long before the Lego Movie's CGI pretended to look like stop motion, there was a small community of creators making what we called brick films. We used traditional stop motion techniques, mashed them all up with the earliest days of hobbyist digital video creators. Hell, most of my films were made with a web camera capable of no more than 640 by 480 for crying out loud. This was long before YouTube itself even existed. Then, once upon a slightly later time, but still quite some time ago now, there was an accident, and my back was never the same since. I have lived in near constant pain ever since, every single day. That's not super fun, and my inability to physically recover to a point where I could return to the life I once had was, in a word, frustrating. I never did much running, but let me tell you what, once you can't do it anymore, at least without not extreme discomfort and consequences, the thought of sprinting across a grassy park after the rain just for the exuberance of it haunts you until you can't even remember what it used to feel like. But among the things this pain also stopped me from doing is one of the most joyful little hobbies I ever had, the stop-motion Lego short films. Because leaning over and reaching over a table, manipulating tiny little figures for hours upon end was just not something I could physically do anymore, so I had to give it up. But at that point, YouTube had finally arrived, and I'd started a channel there to more easily and more conveniently distribute my animations, and when I could make no more, I put myself on camera instead, and helped invent what would become known as vlogging, and later being called an YouTuber. So, silver lining there, I guess. Accidental career invention after my old work in retail was also made impossible by the fact that I live in daily constant back pain. The deep and crippling depression my new permanent injury sent me into did at least finally lead me through a chain of psychologists and psychiatrists where, in another small silver lining, I was, at 26 years old, finally diagnosed as autistic and bipolar. Two inherent neurodiversities that, with the context of a diagnosis, suddenly made a lot of my earlier life make a lot more sense, and gave me a path to tools to coping with what up until that point had been an exasperating perplexity as to why my own experience of the world seemed to differ so broadly from many of my friends, workmates, and peers, and why, for the entirety of my life, I had felt like such a black sheep. But you know what the biggest cruelty of being bipolar is? They don't tell you when you get diagnosed or try to find treatment and start going through all the combinations of medications desperately trying to find something that will help. They don't ever tell you, or at least I was never told, maybe things are different these days, but they didn't tell me that being bipolar is essentially a degenerative disorder. It gets worse. It gets more intense, more frequent, and more difficult to deal with as you age. It even starts chewing away at the very grey matter of your brain, further changing the very structure of it. And they don't tell you your life expectancy is cut by a little more than what a lifetime smoker can expect. We are, in fact, 6 times more likely to die from external causes than the average person is. Isn't that a fun little statistic? And yes, the thing you're possibly thinking about that I can't say out loud because this is YouTube and just the word alone is a dirty thing for advertisers, that does count as an external cause. Maybe they don't tell you how cruel bipolar is because they think the news would crush us, make us lose hope, make us stop trying. I can't think of any other reason to keep it from us, so not only is it cruel, it's patronizing too. It's now been about 18 years since I was diagnosed, and while it's never been easy, it is getting worse. I'm not okay lately. I'm not okay a lot more often than I used to be not okay, and it's getting harder and harder to suffer through it while it passes. I know in my head that the very nature of bipolar means that the depression will pass. It always does, it always has done. But it's getting harder and harder to hold on to that thought and let it pass. And the proverbial they, will tell you that it's okay not to be okay. There's whole social media campaigns from well-meaning people about how it's okay not to be okay, and you can talk about it. But whoever came up with that, the they, don't know what this feels like. Because if they knew what it feels like, they wouldn't say that. And they're ignoring or ignorant of what happens nearly every time someone does talk about mental illnesses this severe. The judgment, the ignorant advice, the shitheads who insist you can cure it just by smiling more or watching a fun movie or going for longer walks and getting more exercise, doesn't work like that. They don't see a world that I see, where every time someone doesn't align with the most baseline social norm, they're accused of being mentally ill as a pejorative, as a diminutive, as an insult, and it makes them less of a person. It makes them weak. It makes them unsuitable for society, damaged. And they don't see that we live in a world where the reaction to someone being mentally ill, legitimately, or even suspected or accused, is bullying and resentment and ostracization rather than, compassion, empathy, and help, or just leaving them alone instead of attacking them. And I feel so goddamn bitter about all of it. But I have been at least keeping busy while the depression makes it so hard to make the types of videos that do well here and that I enjoy making, or, to even go outside or be functional in any useful way, or even just play some video games. I can't focus properly. My reaction time is shit and can't think clearly. So lately I've been trying to teach myself how to 3D model and eventually animate. That's something I can do. If I lose focus, I'll just, stare into space for 30 seconds or 5 or 8 or 10 minutes or whatever it is. I can just do it bits and pieces at a time. Maybe I can do little films again like I used to, except sitting in a supportive chair now instead of leaning over a table shifting Lego around. Maybe that'll bring me some joy, or at least let me bring some joy to someone else. But then, well, I can tinker and fiddle away at the mechanics of it all while learning. The depression also does make it so hard to be properly creative, to think of an idea, to script it out, the story, the dialogue, all of that. I hope I can still do it all. I've got half a dozen half-baked ideas right now for one-offs or even little series, but I can't properly flesh any of them out, and it's so exasperating to just have these ideas and just not be able to be functional enough to execute them. It's misery. So I guess I'll just keep tinkering, keep learning, and maybe what I learn will let me do something if and when the depression passes. Or maybe I'm just burning time and keeping my mind busy so the intrusive thoughts can't take over. Maybe what I'm learning here will be in fact useless. Doesn't really matter, I suppose. Learning to 3D animate has been on the back burner for close to 2 decades now, ever since I did my back in, so it's nice at least to finally be getting around to it properly, and it's nice how much better the tools have become since the last time I tried. The render you're watching right now was mostly about learning animation basics and how to do camera keyframing for various elements in Blender and whatnot. And yes, I know some of the textures are missing on the building. The character model is my own work made from scratch, and it turns out I quite like working with low poly aesthetics. It's nostalgic and joyful, and the limits help provoke creativity. I think I might stick with it, actually. The storefront, the bit with the missing textures, which are the bright pink things if you're not that familiar with how 3D modeling works. They're not supposed to be pink, they're supposed to have textures. Pink is what happens when the textures go missing. That's just an asset I got from TurboSquid. I don't know why it broke, and I didn't have the patience to really fix it because, well, it's not really the point of the exercise. Still, with the lighting, it looks kind of cool, even if it is pink where it shouldn't be pink. In any case, now that I'm reasonably beginner level familiar with character modeling and rigging and all that sort of stuff, I might next try to build a little room. Anyway, hopefully next video will be something, regular and interesting to those of you who've come to the channel more recently. This is kind of an older school vibe, I guess, kind of a vloggy, off the top of your head, just kind of bearing my emotions a little bit. Friggin' age since I made a video like that, I think. But this is all I can do for right now, so this is what you get, and I live in a world where if I don't keep uploading to YouTube, the algorithm just will punish me forevermore, and then I will starve to death and get kicked out of my place and can't pay rent and all that sort of stuff. So gotta try something, eh? Thumb up, share, comment, let me know what you think about the The model in particular.